"Don't look at me like that," the billionaire said. But he was the one falling first. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. Rain slid down the glass walls of the high-rise restaurant like melting silver. Inside, soft jazz filled the air, blending with the clinking of crystal and quiet laughter. At a corner table, Evelyn Brooks gripped the strap of her worn leather purse, trying not to stare at the gleaming cutlery that probably cost more than her month's rent. She had promised herself not to tremble, but her hands would not listen. Across the table sat Alexander Reid, the billionaire who ruled half of New York's skyline. His gray suit fit him like armor, his cufflinks catching the dim light. He looked up briefly from the papers in front of him, his voice even businesslike. "Miss Brooks, let us not waste time. I need a wife. You need financial security. We can help each other." The words hit her harder than she expected. A wife? As in a real marriage? He slid a document toward her, each page thick and cold beneath her fingertips. Legal, yes, but temporary. 6 months. Purely contractual. There will be no intimacy, no emotional involvement. You will attend public events with me, wear the ring, and act the part. In return, your mother's medical bills will be covered in full. Evelyn blinked, unable to speak. Her mother's hospital room flashed in her mind machines beeping, bills stacking, nurses whispering about overdue payments. Alexander leaned back, watching her with unreadable eyes. "You can walk away now if you wish, but the offer expires tonight." Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Evelyn swallowed hard. "What happens after 6 months? You disappear from my life. Clean break. You will receive compensation and full protection under a non-disclosure clause. Kumbo." Her heart ached at the word disappear. She had spent her whole life being invisible. Still, she nodded slowly. "Fine, I will do it. But if we are pretending, then we pretend completely. I do not want pity." A flicker of surprise crossed his face before he masked it again. "Understood." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, a ring glittered like a captured star. "You will need this tomorrow." Evelyn hesitated before slipping it on. It fit perfectly, almost mockingly so. The next day, the courthouse felt colder than usual. The fluorescent lights hummed above them as the judge pronounced the words that would tie two strangers together. "By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Alexander turned to her, his tone still flat but softer somehow. "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Reid." Outside, rain had turned to mist. Evelyn stood beneath her umbrella, watching cars blur by in streaks of red and gold. The city looked the same, but everything had changed. He stopped beside her, his breath visible in the chill air. "A car will take you to my apartment. The staff has been informed. Keep your distance from the media, and remember, this is a partnership, not a romance." She almost laughed, but the sound caught in her throat. "Do not worry, Mr. Reid. I do not fall that easily." Under. His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary. "Good," he said quietly, "because neither do I." As the car door closed behind her, Evelyn stared at the city through the rain-speckled window. The world outside shimmered like a promise she did not believe in. But somewhere deep down, a whisper betrayed her resolve. What if this pretend marriage was the most real thing that ever happened to her? The penthouse was silent when Evelyn arrived. Marble floors gleamed under soft golden light, and every surface reflected her own uncertainty. The maid guided her through the living room where abstract paintings hung like trophies. "This will be your room, Mrs. Reid," the woman said politely, setting down Evelyn's small suitcase. The title sounded strange in her ears. Mrs. Reid. She had worn the ring for less than a day, and it already felt heavier than gold. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed and looked out over the glittering city. From here, New York seemed calm, almost unreal. Somewhere below, her mother slept in a hospital bed, the bills now magically covered by this strange agreement. She whispered a quiet promise. "Just 6 months, Mom. I will find a way to make it right." At dawn, a knock sounded at the door. Alexander stood there, crisp and composed, holding 2 cups of coffee. "We have a breakfast interview at 9. The press will expect us to appear united." His tone was firm, but his eyes softened for half a second before he looked away. Evelyn took the cup with both hands, the warmth grounding her. "I have never done an interview before," she admitted. He glanced at her simple dress, the faint nervous tremor in her hands. "Then just smile and let me speak. They will not bite." At the caf, flashbulbs greeted them like a storm. Alexander's arm wrapped around her waist in a move so practiced it looked real. The reporters shouted questions, but his calm presence anchored her. He answered about the company, about his wife's quiet strength. Evelyn could not tell if it was acting or something more. When one journalist asked how they met, Alexander paused just long enough for her to panic. Then he smiled. "At a fundraiser. She spilled coffee on me. I decided I could not live without that chaos in my life." Laughter rippled through the room, and Evelyn found herself laughing too, even as her cheeks burned. Afterward, in the car, she turned to him. "You are good at this." He looked out the window. "Pretending?" "Yes," she said quietly. A long pause. "You will learn," he replied, but there was no pride in his voice, only weariness. Days passed in careful routine. Breakfasts at opposite ends of a long table, silent car rides to public events, every move rehearsed, every smile deliberate. Yet sometimes, when she thought he was not looking, she caught him watching her reflection in the window, curious, almost gentle. One evening, she returned from a charity dinner he had skipped. The apartment lights were low. Alexander was standing by the piano, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. A single photo lay on the keys, a woman with kind eyes and a little boy on her lap. Evelyn froze. "Your family?" He did not turn. "My mother and my brother. They died when I was 20. Plane crash. I learned early not to trust the idea of forever." Evelyn's throat tightened. She wanted to say something, anything, but the weight in his voice told her silence was kinder. He finally faced her, expression guarded. "This contract is not about emotions. Remember that." "I remember," she said, though part of her wished she did not. The next morning she woke to find a thick envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was a detailed schedule: charity galas, business dinners, magazine shoots. At the bottom, a handwritten note: "Dress however you like, but do not fade into the background." The words were sharp, yet they felt like a strange kind of encouragement. She smiled faintly and circled the next event in red ink. That night's gala was at the Waldorf Astoria, a glittering ocean of diamonds and champagne. Evelyn's borrowed gown shimmered under the chandeliers. As she entered beside Alexander, whispers rippled through the crowd. Some admired, some judged. A tall blonde approached, her tone sweet, but her words edged with poison. "So this is your new wife, Alex. She looks different from the last one." Evelyn froze, unsure how to respond. But Alexander spoke first, his voice cool as glass. "Yes, she is. That is exactly why I married her." For a brief moment, silence fell between them and the world. Evelyn felt his hand at her back, steady and real. When the music started again, she turned to him, whispering, "Thank you." "Jamal." He gave a faint smile, one that reached his eyes for the first time. "Do not look at me like that," he said softly. But there was no warning in his tone, only something unspoken that neither of them dared name. Later that night, as the city lights blurred outside their car, Evelyn rested her head against the window, replaying the words in her mind. "Do not look at me like that." Yet he was the one who kept glancing her way, as if trying to remember when the act had stopped feeling like an act. The next few weeks moved like a carefully choreographed dance. Every morning began with the same quiet tension, the soft hum of the city far below the penthouse windows. Evelyn and Alexander lived under the same roof, bound by a contract that told them exactly how close they could be and how far they must stay apart. Yet something in the air between them had begun to change. Evelyn noticed it in the smallest things. How he waited for her to take the first sip of coffee before starting his own breakfast. How his tone softened when he said her name. How his eyes lingered a fraction too long when she laughed. She told herself it was imagination, a trick of the mind born from loneliness. But the way his gaze followed her said otherwise. One Thursday afternoon, Alexander's assistant delivered an envelope. Inside was an invitation to the Reid Industries annual gala, the company's grandest event of the year. Evelyn traced the embossed gold letters with her fingertips. "I assume I am expected to attend," she said lightly. Alexander looked up from his laptop. "Of course, you are my wife." "Your contract wife," she corrected. He closed the computer and stood, his voice quiet but firm. "Appearances matter, Evelyn. The board must believe what they see. You will be by my side that night." She wanted to argue but bit her tongue. The gala was the heart of his empire, the world he belonged to, the world that had never wanted someone like her. The night of the gala arrived wrapped in winter air. Evelyn's gown was a deep emerald that glimmered under light. The dress had been chosen by one of Alexander's stylists, but when he saw her descend the staircase, his breath caught. For a moment, he forgot the photographers waiting below. "You look." His voice trailed off, rare hesitation breaking through his polished control. She met his eyes with a small smile. "Presentable for a contract wife?" His lips curved, dangerously more than that. The car ride to the event was silent, heavy with words neither dared to say. When they arrived, camera flashes burst like fireworks. The couple posed together, practiced smiles hiding unspoken truth. Inside, chandeliers reflected off crystal glasses and polished marble. The elite of New York surrounded them, whispering, judging, admiring. Evelyn did her best to play the part. She smiled, shook hands, and answered polite questions about their romantic story. Alexander remained close, his arm occasionally brushing hers, a silent reassurance amid the performance. Then came the moment that cracked the illusion. During the charity auction, an investor raised his glass and said loudly, "Mr. Reid, your wife is lovely. But tell me how long before you trade her for another model." Laughter rippled across the table. Evelyn froze, humiliation burning her cheeks. She waited for Alexander to dismiss the comment, to defend her. Instead, he set down his drink, his expression unreadable. He stood slowly, the crowd falling quiet. "You are mistaken," he said evenly. "She is not a model. She is the reason I remember why I built any of this." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Evelyn stared at him, stunned. His gaze locked with hers, steady and raw. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to the space between them. Then the music resumed, and he offered his hand. "Dance with me," he said. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Alexander, you do not have to—" "I know," he interrupted softly. "But I want to." He led her onto the dance floor. The orchestra swelled, violins weaving through the air. His hand settled at her waist, firm yet hesitant. They moved in rhythm, their reflections swirling across the mirrored walls. Evelyn felt her pulse race. For the first time, it did not feel like acting. When the song ended, applause erupted. Alexander leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Do not look at me like that," he murmured again. But this time it sounded like a confession, not a warning. Later in the car, neither spoke. The city lights streaked by in gold and blue. Evelyn turned to the window, her thoughts spinning. He said it for the crowd, she told herself. It was part of the show. But when she glanced at him, his expression was distant, troubled, as if he were fighting something even he did not understand. Back at the penthouse, she reached for the door handle, but his voice stopped her. "Evelyn." She turned. "Thank you for tonight." Her heart twisted. For pretending? For reminding me what it feels like not to. He walked away before she could answer, leaving her alone in the quiet marble hallway. The elevator doors closed behind him, the sound echoing like a final note. Evelyn leaned against the wall, her pulse racing, her mind whispering a truth she did not want to hear. She was falling for him, and the one rule of their contract, the only rule that truly mattered, was not to fall in love. The following morning, the world looked the same, but nothing between them felt familiar. The gala had left a trace neither could shake. Evelyn woke early, the city still gray outside the windows. In the kitchen, she found Alexander already there, sleeves rolled up, reading the financial pages with that calm focus she used to find cold. Now, it only made her chest tighten. "Good morning," she said softly. He glanced up. "Coffee is ready." She poured a cup and stood across from him. The silence stretched until she finally asked, "Do you always defend your employees like that?" His newspaper lowered a fraction. "You are not my employee." R1. "Then what am I?" Alexander hesitated, then folded the paper. A reminder that even perfection looks empty when it stands alone. Her heart stumbled. "Is that another line for the press?" He gave a faint smile. "No reporters here, Evelyn." She looked away, unwilling to let him see how his words had struck her. "Then maybe you should stop talking like one." For the rest of the day, they worked in separate rooms. Yet the distance felt heavier than any argument. Evelyn tried to focus on a charity project she had been assigned to design a campaign for underfunded art schools. It had been her idea, one that Alexander had approved without question. When she walked into his office that evening, he was still at his desk, surrounded by the glow of 2 monitors. "I finished the proposal," she said. "It could help hundreds of kids if we push it before the quarter ends." He looked up, exhaustion written in the lines of his face. You care about it. Kogol. Someone has to. A pause hung between them. Then, almost under his breath, he said, That is what makes you dangerous. She frowned. Dangerous? He stood, closing the space between them. Because I forget this is supposed to be a contract. Her pulse raced. You made the rules, Alexander. I know, he said quietly, and I hate that I am breaking them. Before she could speak, his phone buzzed. The sound cut through the moment like glass. He answered sharply. Reid speaking. His face changed as he listened, eyes narrowing, jaw tight. When he hung up, the softness was gone. The press has the contract, he said. Evelyn froze. What? Someone leaked it. The details, the signatures, the payment arrangement. By tomorrow morning, every headline will call you a fraud and me a manipulator. Her stomach dropped. Who would do that? He shook his head. A rival, a board member, anyone who wanted leverage. It does not matter now. He started gathering papers, already in damage control mode. We will deny everything. Say it is fabricated. She stepped forward, voice trembling. You want me to lie? I want to protect you, he snapped. By calling me a liar? His frustration spilled over. Evelyn, this world does not forgive mistakes. You do not survive it by telling the truth. She stared at him, stunned. Maybe you do not, but I am not built to hide behind you. 2. Without another word, she tore the ring from her finger and set it on the desk. This was supposed to save my mother, not destroy who I am. He reached for her, but she stepped back. Evelyn, please. No, she said, her voice breaking. You wanted control. Well, here it is. You win. She turned and walked out before he could answer. Outside, rain began to fall again, steady and relentless. By the time she reached the elevator, tears blurred her vision. The contract that had once felt like her lifeline now felt like a chain. In his office, Alexander stood motionless, staring at the ring glinting under the desk lamp. The city roared beneath him, distant and uncaring. For the first time in years, he did not know what to do. The man who built an empire from precision and power could not fix the one thing that truly mattered. He picked up the ring, the metal cold against his skin. This was not supposed to happen, he thought. She was supposed to play a role. He was supposed to stay untouched. Yet the truth settled in like a confession. He had fallen first. Hours later, the headlines appeared online: Billionaire's marriage exposed as fake deal. Photos of them at the gala flooded every feed. Reporters camped outside the building. In one image, Evelyn was mid-laugh, her eyes bright, unaware of the storm coming. Alexander stared at the screen, guilt twisting his gut. He could call his lawyers, silence the story, threaten lawsuits, but none of that would matter, not if she was gone. He reached for his phone, hesitated, then set it down. The only thing that could fix this was not power or money. It was honesty, something he had buried long ago. Outside the penthouse window, dawn began to break over New York, washing the city in pale light. Alexander closed his eyes, a single thought echoing in his mind. Find her. Tell her the truth. Before it is too late. Evelyn spent the next days hiding from the noise. She rented a small apartment on the east side, a place where no one knew her name. The walls were thin, the heater clicked, and the air smelled faintly of old paint. But for the first time in months, it was quiet. No cameras, no flashbulbs, no billionaire husband rehearsing smiles for the world. Just silence and the echo of her own heartbeat trying to believe that everything was over. The news followed her everywhere. Headlines screamed betrayal, deceit, scandal. Her phone lit up with messages from unknown numbers, reporters pretending to be friends. She stopped answering calls altogether. The only name she could not block was Alexander's. Every few hours, another message appeared. Please let me explain. Then another, I can fix this. She deleted them all. At night, she sat by the window watching the rain trace lines down the glass. The city felt different now, less like a dream, more like a stranger. She missed her mother but could not face her yet. What would she even say? I married a man for money, and somewhere along the way, I forgot it was fake. Across town, Alexander's world was crumbling in a different way. The board had called an emergency meeting, investors panicked, and every headline dragged his name through the mud. His assistant entered the office nervously. Sir, the press conference is in 1 hour. The lawyers suggest denying everything. Alexander stared at the city beyond the glass tower. His reflection looked unfamiliar, tired, guilty, human. No, he said quietly. For once, we will tell the truth. The assistant froze. That will destroy you. He exhaled slowly, then let it. That afternoon, the conference room filled with reporters. Cameras clicked, microphones lined the table. Alexander stepped to the podium, no script in hand, no rehearsed smile. "Yes," he said, his voice calm but rough. "The marriage was arranged. It began as a contract. I thought I could control everything, even feelings. I was wrong. Evelyn Brooks never wanted money or fame. She saved my reputation when she should have saved herself. She deserves your respect, not your judgment." A murmur rippled through the room. Flashbulbs burst. One journalist called out, "Are you saying you love her?" Alexander looked straight into the cameras. "I am saying she taught me what love actually means." He walked away before anyone could ask more. Outside, the sky had turned to gold. For the first time, he felt lighter, not because he was forgiven, but because he had finally stopped lying. Evelyn saw the press conference replayed on a store television while walking down the street. She stopped in the rain, watching his face on the screen. There was no arrogance, no performance, only truth. Her throat tightened. The people around her passed by without a glance, umbrellas brushing her shoulders. But she could not move. Later that evening, a knock echoed at her apartment door. She opened it slowly. Alexander stood there, rain-soaked, holding an envelope and something small in his hand. "I know you told me not to find you," he began, his voice raw. "But I had to give you this." He handed her the envelope first. Inside was a check, every dollar from their contract returned, voided, and signed over to a new account labeled Brooks Foundation for Art Education. "You started this project," he said softly. "You cared about it long before I did. It is yours now. No conditions." Evelyn stared at him, unable to speak. "And this," he continued, opening his hand to reveal the ring she had left on his desk, "is not part of the contract anymore? Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because for the first time, I want something real," he said, "even if it means losing everything else." She looked at him, at the man who had once treated love like a business deal and now stood trembling in the rain. Her chest ached with every heartbeat. "You think it is that simple?" "No," he said honestly. "But I can start by saying I am sorry, and by asking, not demanding, that you let me try again." The rain softened to a drizzle. Evelyn stepped closer, searching his eyes for the lie she used to expect. There was none. Only a quiet sincerity that disarmed her completely. "I do not know if I can trust you," she said. "I will wait until you can," he replied. For a long moment, neither moved. Then she reached out, closing his hand around the ring. "Keep it," she whispered. "If we ever find our way back, maybe you can ask me again." He nodded, a faint smile breaking through the exhaustion. "Then I will hold on to hope." As he turned to leave, Evelyn called after him. "Alexander." He looked back. "Thank you for telling the truth." Talmud. He nodded once more, eyes glistening under the streetlight. "Thank you for teaching me how." The door closed between them, but this time the silence felt different, like a pause, not an ending. Evelyn leaned against the frame, the sound of rain fading into the city hum. For the first time since it all began, she allowed herself to breathe, knowing that sometimes love does not end with a contract or a promise. Sometimes it begins again with the truth. Winter passed quietly. The scandal faded the way storms always do, leaving behind clear skies and wreckage to rebuild. Evelyn poured herself into the foundation Alexander had given her. She refused to touch his money, but she used his gesture as a starting point, gathering sponsors, teaching art classes, and rebuilding her name through hard work. The small art center opened 3 months later in a renovated warehouse by the river. It was nothing like the marble halls of the Reid Empire, but when sunlight hit the painted walls and laughter filled the air, it felt like home. Children splashed color on canvas, elderly volunteers helped wash brushes, and in every corner there was life. Evelyn felt whole again, even if a part of her still ached whenever she saw a gray suit or heard his name on the news. Alexander, meanwhile, had kept his promise. He stayed away. He did not call, did not send flowers, did not use his power to reach her. Instead, he rebuilt quietly, one honest decision at a time. The press, starved for drama, soon moved on. But every morning, when he passed the empty chair across his breakfast table, he thought of her. One spring afternoon, Evelyn was cleaning the classroom when a man appeared at the doorway. His assistant announced him nervously, "Mr. Reid would like to donate supplies." Evelyn froze, the brush still in her hand. She looked up to find Alexander standing there, holding 2 boxes of art kits. He smiled faintly. "Do not worry, There are no cameras. I just wanted to see what you built." Her heart stumbled, but her voice stayed steady. "It is not mine alone. The kids did most of the work." "I can see that," he said, stepping closer. His eyes scanned the paintings covering the wall, bursts of color, messy and alive. "It is beautiful. You are beautiful." She looked away. "Do not start with that, Alexander." "Lo, I am not starting anything," he said softly. "I am just telling the truth." The air between them thickened with everything left unsaid. He set the boxes down, his tone quieter. "I thought success meant control, but I was wrong. It means letting go when you love someone enough to want their freedom." Evelyn's throat tightened. "And now?" "Now," he said, "I just want to be part of something real. Even if all you can give me is a seat in the back row." "Caw." The children ran in from the hallway, breaking the tension. One little girl tugged Evelyn's sleeve. "Miss Brooks, he looks like the man on TV. Is he famous?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "He used to be." Alexander chuckled. "Still am, apparently." He crouched beside the girl, picking up a stray paintbrush. "Mind if I help?" The girl nodded eagerly, handing him a small canvas. Paint splattered on his suit as he clumsily tried to follow her instructions. Evelyn laughed before she could stop herself. For the first time in a long while, laughter felt easy. Weeks passed, and Alexander kept visiting. Sometimes he brought supplies, sometimes coffee, sometimes nothing but quiet company. He never crossed a line, never pushed her to decide. He was simply there, steady, respectful, patient. The children adored him. Evelyn pretended not to notice how her heart warmed each time he walked through the door. One evening, as she locked up, she found a sketchbook sitting on her desk. Inside was a drawing of the art center, the building, the children, and her standing by the window. Beneath it, written in careful handwriting, were the words, "Every masterpiece begins with a mistake worth keeping." She smiled, recognizing his handwriting immediately. The next weekend, the foundation hosted a small exhibition for the students. The hall buzzed with excitement. Families filled the seats. At the back of the room stood Alexander, dressed simply. No entourage, no pretense. When the speeches ended, Evelyn stepped up to the microphone, her heart steady. "This center was built from kindness," she said, "from people who believed second chances are not a weakness. They are proof that love and honesty can rebuild anything." Applause filled the room. She caught Alexander's eyes across the crowd, his gaze held pride, not possession. When the audience began to disperse, he stayed by the door, waiting as she thanked guests. Finally, when the room emptied, he walked forward. "You once told me you did not fall easily," he said quietly. Evelyn smiled. "And you told me you did not either." He took a small step closer. "I lied." Before she could answer, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something she thought she would never see again, the same ring. No longer a symbol of a deal, but of everything they had survived. "This time," he said, voice trembling slightly, "there is no contract, no condition. Just me asking you because I love you." Evelyn's eyes glistened. The room felt weightless. "Alexander," she whispered, her voice shaking. He smiled softly. "You do not have to say yes. Just tell me you believe it is real." She looked at him for a long moment, then reached for his hand. "It has been real for a while now." "Lowe's?" He laughed, breathless with relief, and she let him slip the ring onto her finger once more. The children watching from the hallway cheered, and Evelyn could not help but laugh through her tears. Outside, the evening sun poured golden light through the windows, painting the floor with warmth. Alexander took her hand, whispering, "Do not look at me like that." Evelyn smiled. Too late. Comber. This time there were no secrets, no contracts, only two people who had finally learned what real love looked like when you stopped pretending. The weeks that followed felt like a calm after years of storms. There were no cameras, no reporters chasing headlines, only real mornings that began with laughter and quiet cups of coffee. Alexander moved slower now, no longer ruled by deadlines or shareholders. Sometimes he helped the children mix paint at the art center. Sometimes he simply watched Evelyn work, memorizing the way sunlight touched her hair. People still whispered about them. Some called it redemption, others called it scandal turned miracle. But Evelyn and Alexander stopped listening. They had learned that peace was not about silence. It was about choosing what mattered and letting go of everything else. One afternoon, Evelyn was arranging paintings for a charity auction when Alexander appeared at the door holding a small box. He looked nervous, something she had rarely seen. "Before you panic," he said, smiling, "it is not another contract." She crossed her arms playfully. "You learned fast." He opened the box to reveal a delicate key pendant resting on a thin gold chain. "This is the key to the studio's rooftop. I finished the renovation. I thought you might want a place to breathe when the world gets loud." Evelyn traced the key with her fingers, her heart full. "You built this for me?" "I built it for us," he said. "Because every time I see you here, I remember what real purpose looks like." That evening they climbed to the rooftop together. The city stretched beneath them, glittering like a field of stars. The wind was soft, carrying the sound of music from the streets below. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Alexander broke the silence. "Do you remember the night at the gala?" he asked. Evelyn laughed softly. "The one where you told me not to look at you like that?" He nodded, smiling. "Yes, that one. I think that was the moment I fell in love with you." She looked at him, eyes shimmering in the fading light. "And I think that was the moment I started pretending it was not real." He reached for her hand. "No more pretending then." She squeezed his fingers, whispering, "No more." One. Below them, the city lights flickered like applause. Alexander pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "I used to believe love was a weakness," he said softly. "Now I know it is the only thing that makes power worth having." Evelyn smiled through tears. "And I used to think you were the coldest man alive. Now I know you were just waiting for someone to melt the ice." They stood together in the quiet glow of the skyline. The contract that once chained them now nothing more than a memory. The rooftop lights reflected in the ring on her finger, the same ring that had once symbolized duty but now represented choice. As the night deepened, Alexander whispered, "Do not look at me like that." Evelyn smiled, her voice barely above a breath. "I will never stop." "Oh, bah." The wind swept around them, carrying laughter, promise, and the sound of a city that had finally forgiven them. And for the first time, both knew they were exactly where they were meant to be together, free and real. A year later, spring returned to New York with its familiar hum of yellow taxis, blooming park trees, and the soft rhythm of rain that had once begun their story. The foundation had grown beyond anything Evelyn could have imagined. What started as a single classroom by the river was now a network of programs helping hundreds of students. Every wall inside the main building carried a story painted by small hands' colors of hope and new beginnings. Alexander had stepped away from his corporate chairmanship months ago. He still owned his company, but he no longer ruled it. His days were spent between board meetings and arts center projects, often arriving with his sleeves rolled up, ready to help. The once untouchable billionaire now carried paint stains on his cuffs more often than designer watches, and to everyone's surprise, he looked happier that way. That morning, Evelyn stood before a new mural the children had painted, a scene of two figures standing in the rain, holding the same umbrella. She smiled, recognizing their faces instantly. A little boy tugged her sleeve. "Miss Brooks," Mr. Reid said, "that is you and him." Evelyn laughed softly. "Did he now?" The boy nodded seriously. "He said you saved each other." She turned, spotting Alexander near the entrance, watching her with that quiet smile she had grown to love. He walked over, hands in his pockets. "They wanted to paint a love story," he said. "I told them the truth." "And what truth is that?" she asked, folding her arms. "That sometimes the best stories start with mistakes," he said, "and end with people brave enough to fix them." Evelyn shook her head, trying not to smile. "You are still too smooth for your own good." He leaned closer. "You used to call that arrogance. Now you call it charm." She laughed, rolling her eyes. "Maybe I am getting soft." "Or maybe," he said, taking her hand gently, "you are just happy." The children cheered suddenly as a delivery truck arrived with new art supplies. Evelyn stepped forward to help unload, but Alexander caught her hand. "Wait," he said. "Before you get covered in paint again, I need to show you something." "Usual?" He led her outside to the garden behind the building. The air was crisp, the flowers blooming in neat rows. In the center stood a small bronze plaque mounted on stone. She read the inscription aloud, her voice trembling. "The Brooks Reid Community Center. Built from kindness, restored by truth." Evelyn turned to him, eyes glistening. "You did this?" "We did this," he corrected softly. "This is our foundation, in every sense of the word." For a moment, she could not find words. The past year flashed through her mind, the rain, the mistakes, the heartbreak, and the long road back to forgiveness. She reached for his face, brushing a raindrop or maybe a tear from his cheek. "You really think we have restored everything?" Alexander smiled. "No. But I think we finally know how to keep building." She leaned into him, resting her head on his chest as the first drops of rain began to fall. Around them, laughter echoed from the open windows of the center. the scent of wet earth mixed with the faint hum of the city, a reminder that life was still moving forward. Alexander whispered, "Do not look at me like that." Evelyn smiled without lifting her head. "You said that the first day we met, and you did not listen then either," he said, laughing quietly. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with warmth. "No, because sometimes looking at you feels like the truest thing I have ever done." Lo. He kissed her forehead, his voice barely above the sound of rain. "Then promise me you will never stop." "I will not," she said. "Not ever." And as they stood there, two souls who had once been strangers bound by a contract, their story came full circle, no longer about power or survival, but about love that had been tested, broken, and rebuilt into something unshakably real. A few months later, summer unfolded gently across the city. The air smelled of wet pavement and blooming lilies from the rooftop garden Alexander had planted for Evelyn. Every evening she ended her day there, watching the sun drop behind the skyline that once felt too far above her reach. But this time, it was different because now she belonged to this view, and it belonged to her. The foundation had just celebrated its first anniversary. Donors, teachers, and students filled the main hall with music and light. Photos of smiling children lined the walls, and in the center of the room stood a framed image of a $10 bill, the same one Evelyn had once given to a stranger years ago. Underneath it, engraved in gold, were the words, "Kindness always finds its way home." Alexander had insisted on displaying it, even though she argued it was too sentimental. But that was who he was now. The man who used to measure worth in numbers had learned to measure it in moments. He moved through the crowd, shaking hands, laughing freely. When their eyes met across the room, Evelyn felt that quiet certainty again, the sense that everything they had lost had led them here. After the guests left, the lights dimmed, and soft jazz played through the empty hall. Alexander approached her, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "To 1 year of second chances," he said. Evelyn smiled. "And to the man who finally stopped pretending he did not have a heart." He raised his glass. "And to the woman who taught me how to use it." They clinked glasses, the sound delicate and full of memory. Then, with a small grin, Alexander reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Evelyn frowned. "Please tell me that is not another contract." He laughed. "No, this time it is just a promise." She took the paper and opened it. Written in his neat handwriting were simple words: "No deadlines, no conditions. Only love every day, for as long as you will have me." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "Alexander," he took her hand, his eyes steady. "I do not need a ceremony or an audience, but if you will let me, I would like to start forever tonight." The silence that followed was filled with warmth and the faint hum of city lights outside. She smiled through her tears. "Forever starts with a signature again, does it?" He grinned softly. "Only if you want to make it official." She leaned up and kissed him, slow and certain. "Then you already have my answer." He wrapped his arms around her, resting his forehead against hers. "Do not look at me like that," he whispered, echoing the words that had started it all. Evelyn smiled. "I will never stop, not in this life, not in any." Outside, the city buzzed with life, but inside the hall, time seemed to pause. The framed $10 bill caught the last light of evening, glowing softly, a reminder that every act of kindness, every mistake, every heartbreak had led them exactly here. Alexander held her hand, his voice barely above a breath. "I used to think love was something you bought or bargained for, but you showed me it is something you build." Evelyn looked at him, her eyes shining. "Then let us keep building." Tao. As the music swelled, they turned toward the mural of the 2 figures under the same umbrella, their silhouettes blending into the painted rain. And for the first time, there were no secrets left between them, only truth, love, and a promise written not on paper, but in every heartbeat they shared. Their story, born from a lie, had become the most honest thing they would ever know.